The conflict in Ukraine has garnered much attention worldwide. And it's not surprising having the impact that it has. But one aspect of this conflict that has not garnered as much attention as it needs to have garnered is the symbolic aspect. And the symbolism in the Ukraine and Russia conflict cannot be understated. Prominent figures such as Jonathan Pageau highlighted this aspect of the conflict in the beginning stages. Jonathan Pageau highlighted the event when the Pope Francis held a gathering to mark peace in Ukraine after the Maidan in 2014. And he symbolically released 2 doves as a symbol of peace. Moments after he released those 2 doves as a symbol of peace, one was attacked by a black crow and another was attacked by a white pigeon. And while they both escaped, one cannot simply dismiss that event as something that happened out of pure chance. Now it is left to the observer as to which power, which country is the black crow and which is the white pigeon. Personally speaking, I believe the white pigeon is Russia, and the black crow is the United States of America. Again, many might disagree with those conclusions, but it is up to the observer to draw them. Now, I want to draw attention to symbolism in Ukraine, which I find very fascinating, and that is one of the Ukrainian trident. Now, the trident is found in modern day on most Ukrainian paraphernalia within the flag. We often see prominent figures such as Zelensky wearing the trident. But what is this trident's origin? Where did it come from? And why is it a symbol of Ukraine? Well, the trident is one of the first symbols that is found within the currency of Rus. And Vladimir, who brought Christianity to Rus, was pictured on this currency. Now, Vladimir was a prince of Kiev. But before he was a prince of Kiev, he was also a prince of Novgorod, which is now current-day Russia. Now, this is not the basis for my argument for the unity of the Ukrainian and the Russian people, but it is just a fact that needs to be noted. Vladimir also took Kiev by form of coup, one would say. And when he did so, it is noted he did so without bloodshed. Later on, the father from which he took Kiev, his son would come up to rise against him, would come to murder 2 of his sons, and would form an alliance with Poland or the Polish people to overthrow the lineage of Vladimir. But to get back to the symbolism of the trident, the trident can be linked back to Vladimir. And Vladimir was the person responsible for bringing Christianity to the Rus. Now, this cannot be understated as a monumental event in the history of the Rus, because prior to that time, the Rus was a conglomerate of more or less city-states. And you can imagine this as cities that are separated by hundreds of kilometers of distance, and without the communication and the transport that we have available to us today, you can imagine these cities functioning autonomously for the most part. Now, when Vladimir brought Christianity to the Rus, cities were baptized and churches were built. Hundreds of churches were built. The population was unified in a single direction, where prior to this, pagan beliefs, especially in Novgorod, dominated the local population. When Vladimir brought Christianity, it was a catalyzation and a unification of the people of the Rus. Now, it is interesting to note this fact because while the trident is used in modern Ukrainian symbology, one cannot dismiss the fact that current Ukrainian political climate wants to abolish the Orthodox Church. Now, this is especially ironic, bearing the symbol of the trident that Vladimir stood for, to abolish the very symbol that brought the nation into unity. I ask any listener to ponder this for a moment and to ponder the absurdity of such symbolism. And that is why I think it is inevitable and inescapable that Ukraine will, in fact, cease to exist as a nation. And while there might be Ukrainians that exist on the territory of Ukraine, the nation in and of itself will have to go back to its roots. Because when it made this jest, this provocative and, dare I say, arrogant jest to abolish its own history, the move symbolically destroyed that nation. And when we see now the closure of Orthodox churches in Ukraine and the words of Ukraine's own leaders that they want to be rid of Russian influence within the territory of Ukraine, one cannot help but wonder and think that the leaders of Ukraine do not actually know or respect its history. Rather, they are driven by an ideology of hatred toward Russia and toward the Russian people, which they themselves are a part of. And it's this self-hatred and this idea that you can rewrite and recreate history to join yourself with another group that is the destruction of Ukraine. I want to turn to another piece of symbolic imagery that I found especially astounding. And that was when Volodymyr Zelensky invited Marina Abramovich to reconstruct the schools of Ukraine. Now, for those of you listening who do not know who Marina Abramovich is, she is not a self-proclaimed Satanist, but for anyone who is curious and who will actually look, she is a Satanist, heavily involved with Hillary Clinton and with the elites of the American ruling class. People like John Podesta. She regularly stages art exhibitions, and I use the word art very liberally here because the types of exhibitions she has are grotesque, nightmarish, and satanic, if one were to describe them lightly. And one can view this symbolism as well, because how can you align yourself with a personality such as Marina Abramovich without beckoning the dark forces of hell behind it? you have to wonder what a person's motivations are who does align themselves with that. And you have to wonder, this is the part that always gets me, is that I think the majority of the population wants so badly to believe that Ukraine stands for this symbol of democracy, while simultaneously they are aligning themselves with these malevolent figures, these dark figures. You also look at personalities even as such as Joe Biden. You look at any of the ruling class elites within the United States, and you immediately begin to get the picture that these are not the people that represent humanity in its evolved form. Joe Biden, while I hate to make fun of old people, is a corpse of this idea of the 1990s, maybe the early 2000s, this idea of American exceptionalism. And he has taken on these new ideas of liberalism while proclaiming to be a Catholic. He has taken on these ideas of acceptance for LGBTQ ideas, for acceptance for gay marriage, for these things that push back against the tradition. And so when we contrast the ideas that were inherent in the Ukrainian trident, which wasn't Ukrainian at the time. Vladimir never uttered the words Ukrainian. Vladimir was someone who was very much a pagan Viking until he was transformed, until he was reborn as an Orthodox Christian. And after that, the nation that he founded, the nation of Rus, was very much an Orthodox Christian nation. And after the founding of that Orthodox Christian nation, his face and the trident was printed on a coin. Now, take that in contrast with what we have today, which is the complete desecration of that trident. The people that wear it have no idea where it came from or what it represents. And what it represents is not Ukraine. It represents Rus, the Russian people.